March meeting of the City of Burlington's Historic Preservation Commission to order. Can we do a roll call?
Sure. Chair Pennington.
Here.
Vice Chair Peeler.
Here.
Member Benson.
Present.
Member Rhinton. Here. Member Geis.
Here.
Member Ness.
Present.
And Member Williams.
Here.
Good thing I can remember your names because I can't see from here.
Our first item of business is the approval of minutes.
We didn't have it.
No.
We can hold off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
table that till the next.
Mhm.
Yeah. Can we vote on that?
No.
No. Yeah. All right. So we will take up that approval of February minutes next month in April. Our next item of business is application for major certificates of appropriateness.
We don't have any.
Moving
All right.
on.
Our next item of business is new business.
Yes.
And I will turn to
We,
City Planner James.
thank you. So we thought it was a good opportunity in case those folks have not attended any training sessions or watched any training sessions. We picked 3 shorter ones to all participate together so that we can all get credits at the same time. Because I thought that was a good opportunity, continuing our ongoing momentum for education and outreach. So I've got 3. If anybody's already watched these, just let us know and I'll pick a different one. But these were all about 30 minutes, so you have to watch 3 that will count towards 1 in person, from what I understand. So this will
cover everybody
everyone.
for the year.
So the first one is on, and this is, as you recall, when during COVID, there were a lot of online.
Yeah.
This is African American Heritage Commission. So we'll just watch this. This might be even shorter than that. So
Ideally, we would be bringing portions of this training series to your
Can you hear
community,
okay?
but because of
I can't hear.
COVID-19, we
You
are
can turn it up a
offering
little.
training in a virtual format this
We'll
year.
have to exit out.
At least one session per week will be released in July
You
and
mean turn the
August
lights
and
off?
uploaded to our
Or leave it
North
on?
Would that be helpful? For it to be on the lights off?
Resources YouTube channel.
Can you turn the front
Once
back?
again, it's available. We will
Could you
send
close
out a
captioning?
notification
Yeah.
to the web address through email and a North Carolina Preservation listserv.
Is that better?
If you would like this
Yeah,
session to be
definitely.
counted towards CLG training requirements for the 2020 federal year, please submit a brief summary of what you have learned to me at christy.brantley@ncdcr.gov.
So you can just submit a short email to me, and I'll forward them on to Christy. For those of you who haven't done this before, you just need to, I learned, I was interested about just a quick blurb of something pertaining to what you're watching.
I'm excited to have
They need
you
some paper
report
and
present to the
pens.
session
I can
today.
provide
Yeah,
that
As
too.
Director
I can do it.
and African
Okay.
American Heritage Commission. She received a master's in history with a concentration in museum studies from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Before joining the African American Heritage Commission in 2017, Angela
Is
worked
commentary over the top of the narrative okay?
Archive in Chicago,
Things.
and later as
Questions for
president
Amy?
of James
Yeah, we can pause it.
Historic Site in Hartsville, North Carolina. I look forward to hearing Angela share about the African American Heritage Commission. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you so much, Christy, for having me. Well, greetings, everyone. Thank you again to Christy for having me, as well as all of you for participating and listening. Today, I'm very excited to share more about the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission, as well as how we can support you in your work and in your endeavors. So to start, the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission is a division of the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. We are staffed by myself, the director, Adrian Nearday, our associate director, and Kima Lassiter, our arts and outreach coordinator. Just for a little bit of history, the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission was established in 2008 by general statute. We existed for several years as a program of the North Carolina Office of Archives and History, and then a program of the North Carolina Arts Council, before being elevated to the status of a division within the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. This elevation enabled us to expand our reach and our scope of work, as well as our staff. We went from a staff of a director to a staff of associate director, director, and arts and outreach coordinator. We hold as our mission to preserve, promote, and protect North Carolina's African American history, arts, and culture for all people. Our vision is to cultivate and maintain sustainable statewide African American culture work by building meaningful connections between African American heritage practitioners, institutions, and resources. There are several ways in which we execute this work.
Not this way. Looks like a historic.
I've never seen that.
And several principles that we use to guide this work. The first is sharing. We aim to share work that is being executed across the state to uplift stories and spaces connected to North Carolina's rich African American history and cultural and artistic traditions. Typically, this takes on the form of us amplifying this work across our network or creating exhibits, resources, and programs that uplift these stories and spaces. We also work diligently to support statewide African American heritage work. And I should note that we are not a grant-making institution. As a result, support for the commission looks like connecting a group that we call African American heritage practitioners. These are African Americans who work toward the uplifting African American history, arts, and culture in the state, or individuals who work to uplift stories related to African American history, arts, and culture in the state. Again, we work to connect these African American heritage practitioners and institutions and groups who execute African American heritage work through funding resources, consultants, a broad network of practitioners, and professional development opportunities. We also work to sustain projects committed to preserving, promoting, or protecting North Carolina's African American history, art, and culture. This normally looks like working with groups, institutions, municipalities, and stakeholders to consider best practices and creative methods for this work, and working internally to develop innovative models for this work. In addition, we work to shape in-state work designed to activate African American spaces, cultural landscapes, and heritage tourism. This again looks like strategizing with groups to think creatively about how to activate these spaces, landscapes, and tourism opportunities, and also working internally to develop innovative strategies to do this activation work. Some of you might be familiar with the North Carolina Green Book Project, also termed Oasis Spaces, African American Travel in North Carolina, 1933 through 1966. that is one of these statewide heritage tourism opportunities that we have been able to innovate and build with support from the State Historic Preservation Office.
Has anyone ever seen this resource? I've heard about it.
I've heard of it too, yeah.
But this is the first time I've seen like a cover of it, so this was a resource that was available, I think, for those who were traveling in the area that knew that lodging or places to stay were friendly to all.
In addition, our Freedom Roads program is a trail system that highlights sites connected to freedom-seeking history in North Carolina. Again, another innovation in statewide tourism and cultural landscaping in our. So, what does this mean for you? How can the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission help you and specifically your work? Well, we can provide technical assistance to you in specific ways that align with our guiding principles: sharing, supporting, sustaining, and shaping. I'll note that this technical assistance work is specific to local historic landmarks and local historic districts. So first and foremost, we're happy to work with you to strategize. We can strategize creative reuse of historic properties designated as local historic landmarks. We can think through interpretation strategies within historic properties designated as local historic landmarks. We can also strategize with you around inclusive stewardship models for local historic landmarks and local historic districts.
Put this under your tongue to rise up whenever you want. Today, I will reveal something almost no man knows it exists.
We can also work diligently with you to create connections between you, local preservation commissions, and African American stakeholders, including local Black heritage groups and African American heritage practitioners. We can also create connections for local preservation commissions to financial resources, consultants, and a vast network of African American heritage practitioners. Again, our network, when I say vast, I mean vast. And so our connection to consultants and heritage practitioners extends beyond the state of North Carolina. At this point, we have a national reach. And so, again, we're happy to connect you to our network far and wide to help you leverage the work that you aim to do. Finally, we are eager to create connections between our stakeholders and you. Our constituents seek regular support around protecting historically Black neighborhoods and spaces. And so your work can help our constituents to do that. We are happy to guide discussions with and between African American stakeholders, heritage practitioners, families, municipalities, and preservation commissions. We have found that sometimes folks just need a little bit of support in communicating with and between all of these different individuals who are bringing a diversity of experiences and backgrounds and knowledge to the table. And so again, we're happy to guide those conversations. In addition, we're happy to amplify the work that you are doing to preserve and protect spaces that are connected to African American history, art, and culture. So we ask that you share that work with us so that we can raise the alarm and again, amplify the great work that you are doing. We are also happy to provide letters of support if and as needed. I just ask that our staff is fully briefed on your project at least 4 weeks in advance. And again, if you are requesting a letter of support, that request must be made at least 2 weeks in advance. We are also happy to provide support around establishing statewide historical and/or cultural significance to potential local historic landmarks or local historic districts with ties to African American history, art, and culture. If you are hoping to pull us in for this type of support, we ask that you make that request at least 8 weeks in advance so that we can do what we need to do as a staff to pull our resources and our brain power together to offer you the best research support possible. So at this time, I again want to thank you for your time and thank you for taking the opportunity to listen. I look forward to connecting more deeply with each and every one of you as you move your work forward. I hope to hear from you, and you can expect to hear from me specifically as my constituents work to do the work around preserving their spaces in their historically Black communities. You can connect with the Commission more deeply online at aahc.nc.gov. You can also reach us by email at ncaahc@ncdcr.gov. Thank you, Christy.
If you have any more questions, please reach out to me or reach out to Angela at the address she just provided. This concludes our third session of the CLG Virtual Training Series. We plan to release at least one new session next week and will notify you once it's uploaded to our YouTube channel. Please email us with any questions or comments. We welcome your feedback. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Angela. Have a great day.
Let's say I'm working on a research paper about the future of renewable energy. Can I come?
Okay. Anyone have any comments that you want to share regarding this first video?
It reminded me a lot of when we lived in Atlanta for 6 years, and how beautifully preserved Auburn Avenue is. And if you're not familiar, it's where Dr. Martin Luther King's childhood home was, and they've just, the whole neighborhood has been preserved down to the church where his father preached, and of course it's a national park, I believe, along with the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. burial site and museum. But yeah, it's so important to preserve, that history and not let it, sometimes there's little tiny neighborhoods. I mean, you grew up in such a little modest house, and it's nothing grand, but preserving that because it is history, super important. So.
Yeah, I was just doing some searches on Black history in Alamance County, and there's mention of the McRae School.
Oh yeah, I know where that
Are you
is.
familiar with that?
Yeah,
And
drive by all the time.
I don't know if it has any historic designation, but it seems like it should. And then there's another home on Highway 62 that was home to Caswell Holt and his younger brother Sam Holt, who Caswell Holt became the first Black sheriff of Alamance County. And his brother founded the Springdale Church. So I don't know if there's any historic structures involved in any of that, but
And the McRae School, they're working on preserving, some organization is, because when you drive by it, it's beautiful. It's a little one-room schoolhouse.
but I don't know if it doesn't already have its historic designation. Seems like it should.
I wonder if they might be in office to consult with about it, and they have a
Yeah.
seminar, if they might have people who could support Mr. Shields or anything.
We can always write them and have that as an extension. We'll, Bree will talk a little bit later about the workshop that's underway, planning is underway, but we're happy to announce that James Shields who is the, I guess the director of the African American Cultural Arts and History Center that's located in BMOC. He's going to be coming to speak, so that's kind of really exciting. I've heard he's very dynamic, and he's also in a reggae band, which I told him he could talk about music, arts, whatever he's interested in. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Any other thoughts? Okay. All right, so this is number 2, comprehensive community preservation.
Hello and welcome to the Certified Local Government Virtual Summer 2020 Training Series, offered by the North Carolina State Historic Preservation Office. My name is Christy Brantley and I am the Local Government Coordinator. Ideally, we would be bringing portions of this training to your community, but because of COVID-19, we are offering training in a virtual format this year. At least one session per week will be released in July and August and uploaded to our Department of Natural and Cultural Resources YouTube channel. Once the video is available, we'll send out a notification with the web address through email and our North Carolina Preservation Listserv. If you would like this session to be counted towards CLG training requirements for the 2020 federal year, please submit a brief summary of what you have learned to me at christy.brantley@ncdcr.gov. That's KRISTI.BRANTLEY@ncdcr.gov. Please make sure you include your name, the name of your commission, and the session title in your email. A screen with that contact information will be shown at the conclusion of the presentation. Our fourth session will be co-presented by Dan Becker and Sarah Witter-David. Welcome, guys. Dan Becker is currently working as Hurricane Grants Manager for the State Historic Preservation Office. He is owner and consulting principal of Heritage Arts of North Carolina, LLC. He served as Executive Director of the Raleigh Historic Districts Commission from 1986 to 2011, and also managed the City of Raleigh's Long Range Planning Division from 2006 until 2015. Prior experience includes associates with James Williamson, Carl Alstom, Architects in Memphis, as well as Director of the River Corridor Project in Sydney, Ohio. He was awarded the 2007 Robert E. Stipe Professional Award by Preservation North Carolina. Mr. Becker received his Bachelor of Environmental Design degree from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Christy.
And we also have Sarah Willard-David, our Survey and National Register Branch Supervisor. Sarah oversees our National Register Program and the Survey Program. A graduate of Guilford College and the University of Georgia, Sarah worked for an architect in Winston-Salem, followed by Edwards Pittman Environmental in their Raleigh office. In 2005, she joined North Carolina Department of Transportation as an architectural historian, where she traveled the state in one of their big yellow trucks, documenting an eye-popping array of historic resources. After her older son's birth in 2008, she worked from home, most recently as an architectural historian for Calix Engineers and Consultants. Sarah served on local historic preservation commissions in Winston-Salem and Chapel Hill, and earlier in 2018, she finished a 6-year stint on the Raleigh Historic Development Commission, which she chaired for 2 years. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks, Christy.
Thank you both for participating in our CLG training series. Dan, I'm going to turn this over to you now.
All right. Well, thank you, Christy. And what I'm going to do is just kind of share a story from my experience with the Raleigh Historic Districts Commission when we initiated a real strong effort at community diversity and enhancing the Commission's activity in that area. So I'm going to share my screen here if I can push all the right buttons, and we will start that presentation. So this adventure began in the last century for me, actually. When I came to Raleigh in 1986, they had already on the plate waiting for me an effort to really begin to look hard at the city's African-American cultural resources. At that time, only a handful of Raleigh's 70 historic landmarks were African-American resources, yet the city's demographics were 27% African-American. So when I arrived in Raleigh, the commission was in the midst of beginning to gear up for this program. It was initially set as an effort of the commission at the suggestion of Father Arthur Calloway, who was rector of the St. Ambrose Episcopal Church, a long-standing African-American congregation in the city, and was also serving on the city council. The commission took up that and made a pledge. They passed a resolution to begin the project and began a period of evaluation and planning. And in 1986, September of 1986, the city council made an official request that the commission go ahead and become the chief coordinator of the study of Black historic properties in Raleigh. That statement from the council, that specific directive, really gave power and strength to the effort. It shouldn't be underestimated. It would make up lost ground, and we needed it because, as it turned out, it was 3 years of planning, 7 years of work in the initial project, and so a decade of commitment that has then since committed, since the official project closed out. That commitment continued on with additional designations and that sort of work. So the players, this was critical, and I think the most important thing that we did was to ensure that the commission's membership was representative of the city's cultural diversity. So the city council has a policy that all of its boards and commissions should mirror the demographics of the community. So racial, gender, all of those go into the formula of appointing commission members by the council. But frankly, that goal is not always achieved, and I think one of the proudest things in my experience with the commission was that I believe we were the leaders for the city in ensuring that 3 of our 12 members, 25%, were always African-American individuals that came to us from the community with an interest in preservation, with a care for their communities and neighborhoods, and for their heritage in our city. Interestingly, it was a challenge because certified local government requirements also say that you should have persons with a demonstrated interest, competence, or knowledge in historic preservation, make a good faith effort to appoint professional members from preservation-related disciplines. Then our ordinance also said that we had to have a mix of 1/3 people who lived their own property in the historic district. So trying to piece all of these moving parts together and then get 25% African-American membership took real focus from the commission's nominating committee to identify those persons and bring them into the group. And what we found was that by having these folks with the project for a long time, we integrated the commission's concerns for diversity into its lifestyle, so to speak. It wasn't just a project that we were doing, but it was in fact bringing that perspective into all of the activities of the commission, whether it was research or outreach to the community, whether it was the executive committee setting the budget, all of the programming that goes into the commission's activity had to create the opportunity of an organizational culture that ensures the breadth of the community's diversity is part and parcel of every decision that the commission makes. So what was this African American Studies project as we finally developed it? It consisted of two components, oral history and architectural survey. And we completed it in 3 phases. There was a planning phase, a research phase, and then an educational phase. It was mostly consultant and volunteer-based, with policy oversight from the African American Studies Committee, which was a special ad hoc committee that the commission created to guide the project. And it was composed of commission and community representatives and with administration from the commission staff. So it was broad-based. It was more than just the members of the commission. We also reached out to leaders in the community. So the planning phase established the oral history methodology. It identified 8 traditionally African American communities to be surveyed in the architectural survey portion. For the oral history component, we conducted 56 interviews, volunteers who were trained in 4 workshops, held in different community locations, and we also had some paid consultants. The architectural survey documented more than 1,300 buildings and included a preparation of a National Register nomination for a district embracing about 650 properties, which at that time was the largest National Register district in Raleigh. The education phase, that consisted of the publication of 2,000 copies of Culture Town, Life in Raleigh's African American Communities. This was somewhat of a coffee table book, and I told you this project was undertaken in the last century. You can see that we even had a cassette tape that accompanied the book, which gave a flavor of the nature of the oral histories. So the book talked about the communities, talked about people's care and concerns for them, what they valued most, what they saw as the boundaries, as well as exploring the architectural features of those communities. And it was fascinating that how people really embraced the project and were so willing to give of their time to do these interviews, to be interviewed, and some very important voices. And in fact, the name of the book came out of one of the oral histories, because that was how African Americans referred to Raleigh as Culture Town. The attraction of Raleigh with the institutions at Shaw University and St. Augustine's, the things driving in these oral histories that really pulled African Americans to Raleigh was, one, the pursuit of education, and they also expressed the pursuit of home ownership. Those are the 2 things that were really motivating African Americans to come to Raleigh. And then as Jim Crow came along, they were effectively pushed into more localized communities from what had been a more balanced diversity across the city landscape. So there really was a push-pull that was going on in the city as time passed for African Americans. Once we had these documentations and surveys, we began a really focused program to designate historic landmarks and really represent broadly the impact and contributions of African Americans to Raleigh. So we annually had a designation budget that would be used to retain consultants to prepare nominations, and those consultants were often focused on African American resources that had been identified during the survey phase of the project. And we were working on both National Register landmarks and districts, as well as Raleigh historic landmarks and districts later. So we had a broad, long-term effort, and we have continued that over time. And what we have found with this is a great deal of very moving experiences in overcoming great odds to establish communities and to begin the process of participating more broadly in Raleigh's activities. And so we saw clusters of resources in different neighborhoods. We tried to publicize the landmarks through stories on RaleighHistoric.org, and it has been a long journey, but what we have found is the payoff, and that is that it need not be an issue for preservation programs if a true commitment is made to reflecting the whole community in all aspects of the program, assuring that organizational membership is representative of the population, ensures that the breadth of the community's unique points of view are accounted for in program implementation. The end result is a community with an even more powerful sense of place because it celebrates its own unique range of diverse cultural influences. So that was Raleigh's journey that continues today, and Sarah will speak a little bit about more recent efforts both in Raleigh and across the state to really identify and recognize these valuable contributions. So thanks very much, Christy. I appreciate your support and effort in preparing this.
Thank you, Dan. And at the end of Sarah's presentation, we'll share a little slide that has the link to the article that Dan referred to. Please, Sarah.
All right, thank you, Dan and Christy. As Christy said in the introduction, I am the branch supervisor for the Survey and National Register programs for the state of North Carolina. If you have been around a while, you might say that I'm the new Claudia Brown. That's a shorthand way to tell you who I am and where I fit in the process. Survey work is foundational to historic preservation. You can't preserve something if you don't know it exists. Conducting an architectural survey is the process by which you find out what historic, lowercase h, and historic, capital H, resources you have in your community. Each year, our office awards federal historic preservation money through a grant-making process. And through that, we fund many architectural surveys in municipalities just like yours. Sometimes those surveys are broad, comprehensive surveys, which always, as a matter of usual course, include resources that represent the community's entire history. But we have undertaken, or you have undertaken, I should say, several African American themed surveys. To date, we've conducted 9 African American surveys in communities from the mountains to the beach. We do have pretty good geographic coverage of the state. We have had African American based surveys done truly all across the state, but again, only 9. So that just covers a tiny fraction of our state's population and history. So there's plenty of opportunity for you and your commission to propose an African American themed survey project. As Dan noted, Raleigh started paying close attention to the representation in its preservation program a few decades ago. They quickly realized that the local landmarks and their local commission did not reflect even remotely the demographic breakdown of Raleigh's population, and they started taking steps and doing work to rectify that. Now, of course, Raleigh is a big city with not just one dedicated preservation planner, but I believe they actually have 3 now. So that may seem a little bit different than the community you're working in, But setting goals for better representation is something that you can do no matter how small your community is or how small your commission is. So how do you get more local landmarks that represent African American history, and how do you recruit more African American commissioners? Education and outreach plus flexibility are the real keys. We'll start with flexibility for designation because that really is your superpower, and it will also feed into helping you recruit African American commission members. Our office works primarily with the National Register program. That's a federal program with very rigid standards. It focuses heavily on architectural integrity and historical significance. Historical significance is the way, the event or the people that were associated with the building that created significance. And that historical significance can be massaged and it can be argued and bolstered. But architectural integrity, and I use the word integrity here as meaning unaltered, not a statement about character or a moral kind of statement. But architectural integrity is much less subjective than historical significance. Architectural integrity is basically a fancy way of saying, does the building look like it did when the building achieved its historical significance? So you may have an 1880s commercial building that was the scene of a sit-in the 1960s. So its historic significance may come from the 1960s. So then does its architectural integrity reflect the period of the 1960s? Not is it a perfectly intact 19th century commercial building, is it intact from the 1960s? So that's sort of how we look at architectural integrity. The National Register leans very heavily on architectural integrity. Another problem with the National Register leaning so hard on integrity is that resources that are plainer and more simple can't tolerate, so to speak, as much change and still retain integrity. For example, a really fancy Queen Anne house that's dripping with songwork and embellishments, it could probably have a few windows replaced and still be considered to retain its architectural integrity. But a small, plain, simple bungalow, if it loses its windows, it's lost the only element that suggested any style at all. So now it's lost significantly more architectural integrity than a bigger, fancier house that underwent similar type of change. So if you think about that and then think about which type of house is more likely to be associated with an underrepresented population, most likely in your community an African American population, it's going to be the smaller house that is more difficult to retain integrity with to begin with. So listing African American resources on the National Register gets difficult sometimes. But you at the local level have a superpower, and that superpower is flexibility. So wield your superpower for good. Remember that you have a lot of flexibility at the local level. You have a designation process, and that is set and should be something that you're following, but it probably has a lot more flexibility and can require a lot less architectural integrity than the National Register standards that my office works with. So use that flexibility to designate things that might not be pristine. And you can use that flexibility to put the label historic with a capital H on buildings that might not be pristine. And you can use that in a way that our office cannot with the National Register program. The other area for you to address is outreach and inclusion. But it will start to add more people of color to your pool of potential commissioners. And it will start to add African American resources to your list of potential local landmarks and historic districts. So you as a commissioner can work to make some changes, actively reach into the African American community, but that we would like to catch up. Work to find people of color who would be willing to serve on your commission and strive to have your commission's demographics reflect your community. You might even want to set a goal of having underrepresented communities become overrepresented on your commission. Be proactive in identifying buildings and districts as candidates for designation. I would caution you to sort of also, at the same time, temper that, because local designation really needs to come from the ground up. And it's not going to work very well for you to sort of come in from the top down and say, hey, we're the Historic Preservation Commission here to save you. But do be proactive in identifying buildings and reaching out into the community and saying, hey, we think this is something worth designating or worth saving. What do you think? But also reach out to Black civic groups, churches, fraternal orders, sororities. Go to them and ask them what buildings and what places are important to you. What would you like to see us designate? And remember that you might not be able to see the importance in a small house covered in vinyl siding or in a school that's had all its windows resized and replaced. So be humble about what you know and what you don't know, I guess. Remember that you have a lifetime of learning history from one perspective. Ask for help in seeing a different perspective. Don't depend solely on the African American community to educate you. And I realize I just said a very contradictory thing, which is ask for help and then no, don't ask for help. But it is a balancing act, and you know, I commend you to try it and to and just be aware that it is a balancing act, and you do need to take responsibility for your own education and seek out books, podcasts, documentaries. Especially right now, there are tons and tons of different types of programming and media that will help you learn about the history of segregation, the history of enslavement, and how all those things carry forward to today. So look out for ways that you can educate yourself and start to see what you couldn't see before. Also be respectful of other perspectives. Just remember that you have a superpower. That superpower is flexibility and designation, and you can use that superpower for good and for inclusion. So as you go out and promote historic preservation to a wider array of people who may be very different from you, remember that you cannot make people fit into your definition of preservation, and remember that our field in general has a lot of ground to make up. We did not see African American resources for a really long time, and we as a society allowed them to lose integrity, and we allow their significance to go undocumented, to the point that many of them aren't eligible for the National Register anymore. But now we are learning to see them, and you all have the superpower of flexibility. Thank you for your time, and please be in touch with me or anyone from my office if we can help your commission in any way. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Again, I appreciate you and Dan sharing your experience with us. On your screen, you will see a map of North Carolina highlighting our HPO's African American and Thematic Architectural Surveys. Those that were funded with CLG grants are noted with an asterisk. Also, now, on your screen, you should see a link to Dan's article reflecting community diversity at the local level. I wanted to make sure that you had that and could copy that down if you wanted to read that article yourself.
Step into Wix Studio, the web creation platform built for agencies.
So Christy, I wanted to follow up on a couple of things that Sarah shared in her really thought-provoking discussion. And this actually came out of Raleigh's experience working with mid-century modern, but I think it applies here too. And as you use your superpower, the local designation, as you try to educate yourselves on recognizing these resources that may have, as she talked about, some of the integrity challenges that we've been accustomed to. Don't forget that you only get to recommend designations to your elected officials. Our challenge when we were doing mid-century modern designations very early on was that the elected officials kind of started to say, well, I'm older than that thing is, how can it be historic? And in the same way that we needed to educate our elected officials on the value of mid-century modern, you may need to educate your elected officials on the value of these resources that you are bringing to them, because they, like many of us, are used to the big house on the hill with the columns and that sort of thing. So I would just suggest that we look very broadly at how we can bring the entire community, both leadership and the citizenry, along on really broadening and expanding our view of what preservation is.
Yes, that's a great point. It does come down ultimately to whoever your governing body is, city council or county commissioners. And they do need a little extra education sometimes.
This concludes our 4th session of the CLG Virtual Training Series. Hello, and welcome to...
Okay, that's the second one. Any comments?
I looked up the demographics, and Alamance County at large is 22.3% African American. And of course, when we look around the room, we don't have that diversity there. But it seems to me that in terms of outreach and trying to recruit people that might want to be on the commission from more diverse backgrounds, that understanding their neighborhoods and their, like, doing the surveys, it seems like would help lead us to the people who might be most interested or recruitable. But I don't know if we have any budget to do that kind of survey project like he was talking about.
Well, I guess that's, another thing that kind of segues into another discussion later on, but the potential opportunities for grants for the next several years. We have had 2 architectural surveys done, one a while back, and then another follow-up as a precursor to the grant that we applied for the update of the historic district standards. But those areas, may not include, it wasn't a focused survey on that particular topic.
So it was more focused on existing neighborhoods that are already designated as historic, either locally or nationally, or both.
It did not revisit the historic districts themselves. There was discussion about different areas for property. It was really looking at properties to see whether or not they would qualify for the national districts, and if there were particular sites like Williams High School was one area that was specifically identified. But that's something else that we can talk about as a commission as for future potential grant applications.
It's a fascinating process. We lived in Asheville from '89 to '99, and we lived in a neighborhood near the Grove Park Inn, and we're just in the preliminary phases of getting the survey done, and it was so cost prohibitive that after we left, there were a lot of fundraisers, and long story short, it's now Norwood Park. It's on the National Register of Historic Places, but it is such an involved, I was involved in it for about 10 years, just in the preliminary phases. So it's amazing how
there's a lot of intersection of this type of issue with gentrification issues. You look at Chapel Hill and Durham. I grew up in Chapel Hill, there since 1981, and the North Side District has changed so much because it's adjacent to downtown Chapel Hill. but it was the traditional black neighborhood that had the black high school and, it has some important historic significance, but more and more black families haven't been able to afford to stay there and have sold out, to developers or to property management companies that rent out to students, so it's kind of disappointing what's going on.
Any other comments? Okay.
I do think we're about to have an affordable housing crisis in Burlington and Alamance, and that doing that kind of architectural surveys and trying to preserve some of the things they were talking about, it might be good timing to do that before property values go so high that the traditional residents can't afford to live in their own homes anymore.
Coordinator. Ideally,
This is the last one on
portions of this training
rehabilitation
series
credits.
But because of COVID-19, we are offering training in a virtual format this year. At least one session per week will be released and uploaded to our North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources YouTube channel. Once a video is available, we will send out a notification with the web address through email and our North Carolina Preservation listserv. If you would like this session to be counted towards CLG training requirements for the 2020 federal year, please submit a brief summary of what you have learned to me at christy.brantley@ncdcr.gov. Please include your name, the name of the commission, and the session title in your email. A screen with my contact information will be shown at the conclusion of this presentation. Our sixth session is about historic tax credits presented by Restoration Specialist Brett Sturm. Brett joined the HPO staff in 2017 as Restoration Specialist for an 18-county area in the Central Piedmont. He holds a bachelor's degree in history from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and a master's of science in historic preservation from the University of Pennsylvania, where his primary focus was the conservation of brick and terracotta. Prior to his tenure with the HPO, Brett worked as project manager for a general contracting company specializing in historic home renovations in Center City, Philadelphia. Brett is thankful to help with advance preservation work in a region of the state encompassing his own native county of Mecklenburg. As restoration specialist, he provides technical assistance to local governments, private building owners, and nonprofit organizations on old building quandaries of all kinds. He also consults on and reviews building rehabilitation projects seeking federal and state tax credits, the subject of today's training. Away from architecture and history, Brett's primary passions are ceramic arts, gardening, guitar playing, and rowing. Thank you, Brett. Thank you for coming. We look forward to hearing about historic rehabilitation tax credits.
Thanks, Christy.
Explore the rivers of Europe with Tauck and connect more deeply.
Okay. I'm hoping everybody can see me. It's a pleasure to join you here in a virtual format. It's not necessarily our preferred medium, as Christy said, but we're glad we can reach you nonetheless. And as always, we're very appreciative of the citizens out there donating their free time to participate in local historic commission service. You guys are really foot soldiers on the ground, and we're thankful for you. So I'm going to share my screen. And you should be able to see now my presentations. Full screen. I will turn my camera off actually to hopefully make this a little bit faster in speed. All right. So today's subject is rehabilitation tax credits. We have here at the state level a few tools that we use to promote preservation work. Chief among them are just enthusiasm and education, getting out and speaking to people on the ground, making them aware of historic resources in their neighborhood. But as you all likely know, it can be costly to own and maintain old buildings, particularly when there's been deferred maintenance, or particularly when a business plan maybe calls for a new use for an old building. And so there's a very valuable tool in our toolbox that helps promote sensitive adaptive reuse of old buildings, and they are the rehabilitation tax credits. So let's dive in. I'm going to try to keep this presentation relatively short, understanding that you get tiresome sitting on a computer screen all day. So we're going to launch right in. And when I talk about the tax credits, I'm always very careful to sort of make sure folks understand what the tax credits actually are. So to define a rehabilitation tax credit, we look at the term rehabilitation, which we define as the process of returning a property to a state of utility through repair or alteration. It's not the same as reconstruction or restoration. We understand that sometimes old buildings need to be modified to accommodate a new and profitable use. And so that's precisely what rehabilitation allows. Tax credits, we like to make sure folks understand the difference between tax credit and tax deduction. Tax credit is actually a dollar for dollar reduction in the amount of tax that an individual or business owes. Whereas the tax deduction, of course, lowers the amount of one's income that's subject to taxation. So it's a valuable incentive, and people, usually their ears perk up when we talk about it because they realize how valuable it is. Now, in North Carolina, there are two broad tracks for this program, and two different types of tax credit projects, essentially. And I'm going to talk about them separately. I'm going to start with the income-producing properties. You might consider this just a commercial track, although if you have a residential property that you're renting out and deriving a profit from that, that also gets put into this pot of income-producing tax credit projects. These are subject to both a federal and state tax incentive, whereas the other track, which is residential or non-income producing, is a state credit only. I'll talk about that in the second half of this presentation. The first important question if you're a building owner, a historic building owner, is my building eligible? And here we see a great tax credit example from Hickory, North Carolina, which has done a wonderful job utilizing some of its old mill properties. How do we know if a building is eligible for credits? Well, it has to be what we call, quote, certified historic structure. And that means that it is listed individually as a single property in the National Register of Historic Places, or it's located within a National Register Historic District and is designated as a contributing property to that district's historic character. How do you know? How can you find this out? There are a couple different ways. You can get in touch with us and we can check for you. You can also check out our online mapping portal, or HPO Web. And whenever I have a chance to speak to the public, I like to make folks aware of this tool because it's useful for a lot of different reasons. So there's the web address for HPO Web. You can also just Google HPO Web in North Carolina, it should take you there. This is what it looks like. You see our state populated with all these different colors and dots and squares and outlines and neighborhoods and districts. Basically, this maps every single National Register listed property or district in the state. And you can use this portal to enter your address and check to see if indeed your building is located in a district or if it's individually listed on the National Register. It will also tell you actually if your building is within a local historic district or if it's locally landmarked, which is the designation that applies more directly, in fact, to the work of local commissions. So here we have the example of Newton, North Carolina, in Catawba County. And I've zoomed in here and taken a screenshot, and you can see that Newton has two National Register historic districts, those larger blue shaded areas, as well as a couple of individually listed properties. So look up your hometown and see what you find. And what you can do, actually, is take your cursor and click on one of these You should be able to see my cursor. You can literally click on the outline of a district, and a little pop-up window will come up like that, which gives you the opportunity to access the PDF document of the nomination. Every National Register nomination has a property inventory listing every single address located within that district. So this actually is the nomination document for a district in Gastonia, the Worcester National Register District. And you can find, let's say that you own a house and you live in that district. You want to know if your house is contributing. Well, open up that document. I usually do Control F to search that document, and every nomination is indexed. And I'll type in the address, and it will take me to the location within the inventory where that address is featured. It'll do a little description of the property as it was at the time of the district's inception listing. And then you'll see this designation here, contributing. Sometimes you'll see non-contributing. For instance, if the building has been dramatically altered, or if it was built much later after the remainder of the district was built, for example. So find the property in question and see what this designation is. And drop these little check marks here to indicate that all 5 of the buildings listed on this particular page in this inventory are indeed contributing. So they would be eligible for the program. And to dive deeper into the commercial side of the tax credit world, income producing projects that come in all shapes and sizes. We see commercial downtown buildings, your average sort of 2-story Main Street structure. We see mills, of course, and North Carolina has a rich heritage of textile and furniture making. Lots of mills have come through, tobacco mills, of course, in cities like Durham and Winston-Salem. We see rental housing, as I mentioned before, and we also see agricultural properties, including this project, which is really outstanding, the Winmont Farm in Beatty County. Let's talk about the mechanics of the credit. How does this thing work? Well, as I said, for income-producing properties, it's a joint state and federal incentive, so it affects both your federal tax return and your state income tax return. Now, if you do a commercial rehabilitation and you go through the process, you can claim a state tax credit that is equal to 15% of the project's qualified rehabilitation expenditure. We call these QREs, and a future slide will detail a little bit more what we mean by QREs. That's the state side of the credit. This piggybacks, so to speak, onto the federal credit, which is a little bit more robust. 20%, it's equal to 20% of your project's qualified rehabilitation expenditure. The state credit, I should mention, can be enhanced. There's 2 different bonuses that can come into play to enhance and augment that state credit. There's a 5% development tier bonus for projects which occur in Tier 1 or Tier 2 counties as designated by the North Carolina Department of Commerce. And then there's also a 5% targeted investment bonus, which is targeted towards properties of a manufacturing or agricultural use or heritage, so to speak, that have been mostly vacant for the past few years preceding the rehabilitation. So that little extra bonus is meant to incentivize projects occurring for industrial or agricultural properties. Okay, so here we're looking at the 2018 version of North Carolina Commerce's county tier designation. So you can pull up the current map on Commerce's website and check to see which tier rating applies to your county. So let's see how the mechanics of the credit would be applied to a hypothetical scenario, so you can better understand this. Here is a old furniture showroom in Mount Holly, North Carolina, in Mount Holly's downtown National Register Historic District. So let's imagine you own this building and you invested $1 million in qualified rehabilitation expenditures to bring it into new use. So remember, the federal credit is equal to 20% of those QREs. And so that would result in a $200,000 federal income tax credit that you can claim over actually 20 successive years of federal income tax returns. And on the state side, remember that baseline state credit is 15%. So that would equal $150,000 in state income tax credit if you claim 9 successive years of state income tax return. Of course, then we have those bonuses to consider on the state end of things. And at the time I did this slide, Gaston County, I believe, was a Tier 2 county. And so this hypothetical scenario would be subject to that development tier bonus. So add an extra 5%, that equals another 50 grand in state income tax credits.
Switch to Chrome to protect yourself from malware, so you can surf without getting phished.
So wow, that's, the $1 million project, that's $400,000 in tax credits, 40% of the total project cost would be claimed as tax credits. That's a big number. You might be asking, well, do I have to spend about $1 million to qualify for this thing? No. So the rehabilitation must be what the IRS calls a substantial rehabilitation. That means that the QREs must exceed the building's adjusted basis value within a 24-month construction period. Adjusted basis is something that applicants need to determine on their own, usually in consultation with their accountant or a tax professional. We're not allowed really we're not encouraged to comment or allowed to comment personal tax situations or advice. And so, we're architectural people, we're historians, and so we're really here to help on that end. So generally, we'll suggest people confer with their accountant, determine their adjusted basis value for the building in question, and then that becomes essentially the minimum spending amount that they need to exceed during the rehabilitation. And you get a 24-month construction period to rack up those costs. Generally speaking, I'll say, however, the adjusted basis, what we're really trying to figure out is the value of the bricks and mortar of the building itself. So IRS is interested in knowing that value and knowing that you essentially doubled that value by spending the equivalent value during your rehabilitation. So people will generally calculate that by taking the purchase price of the property plus any capital improvements they've already made, and they'll subtract from that the assessed land value and any depreciation they've already done to get sort of that idea of the value of the building itself. Again, talk to your accountant and try to determine that value. So again, QREs, what do we mean by that? They can encompass both hard and soft rehabilitation costs. So hard costs are, actual procedures and material used in the construction work. So that can be anything from rough carpentry to insulation to doors and windows to finished flooring or tile to ductwork, electrical, and plumbing costs. Soft costs are incurred through consultants' fees, engineering fees, architects' fees, permit fees, for example. Important to note that QREs exclude a couple different things. They exclude, for instance, the cost of the property when you acquire it. They also include most site work costs, including hardscape and landscaping costs. They exclude any work pertaining to new additions. It's not to say that a tax credit project can't feature an addition, but you need to be careful to isolate in all your cost tracking measures any costs pertaining to that new construction. Because again, the credit is really geared towards the rehabilitation of historic properties. And of course, you can't claim personal property like furniture or appliances. So just to give a couple examples of applicable QREs, here I show a photo of the Windmock Barn in the previous slide in Davie County. Look at all the timber, look at all the lumber involved in this building. Let's say you had a couple of rotten sills or rafter tails or something like that. Anything pertaining to that structure, rough carpentry, framing, etc., obviously QREs, got a little check mark there. Demolition is a is a good example of a QRE, and this is an interesting case from Wingate, North Carolina, where an intrepid applicant saw this sort of two-bay structure and said, I wonder what's behind that aluminum siding. And so they went on a limb and took that siding down, found a relatively intact historic facade, stucco on brick behind that, and restored that facade as part of the tax credit project, and then claimed the demolition costs as a credit. So we give that a check mark. This is a wonderful tax credit project out of Winston-Salem, but I have an X on it in the sense that this part of the building here is an addition. And so you have QREs being racked up on the rehab of the historic warehouse structure itself, but any cost pertaining to the new addition could not be considered qualified. And so again, applicants need to be really careful on addition projects and isolating costs, not only hard costs, engineering, design, anything pertaining to the building, and isolating that from the old building, because those would not be qualified. So, we'll often say in the field, you don't simply get a tax credit for owning and working on an old building. Your rehabilitation project has to be certified, and it's certified through a joint review from our office and the National Park Service in Washington. And we use the Secretary of Interior's Standards for Rehabilitation to certify projects. And if you're not already familiar with these standards, you will be soon. My counterpart in our Western office, Jim Pappy, reported a great training session going in depth with the Secretary of Interior standards. I'm just going to talk about them briefly here, but they are our review standards for this particular program, both on the commercial end and on the residential state end. How do you claim the credit? Let's see, well, you can begin claiming the credit the year that the building is, quote, placed into service, provided that you've gone through the process and the rehabilitation has been certified by both our office and the National Park Service. At that point, again, state credits can be applied to the returns over as 9 years. The federal credit can be applied ex post facto by 1 year, into the past, on the past return, and on as many as 20 years into the future. So it depends on an individual or a business's tax liability, how they claim the credit. Again, it's something you want to talk with your accountant about before you embark on this process. You want to make sure that you can, that the credit will be useful to you, depending on your own particular tax situation. There was one change late in 2017 that's worth noting. That is that the federal credit actually can't be claimed all in 1 year, as sometimes will happen on large-scale commercial projects. Now that federal credit must be applied over a minimum of 5 years. That's something that's had a bit of an impact, at least on the larger projects. Application process happens in 3 parts. There's a part 1, which actually sort of determines whether or not your building is eligible, is a quote-unquote certified historic structure. Also, as part of the part 1 process, you take and submit photographs of the property before rehabilitation. That gives us sort of a baseline look at how things were prior to work being done. It's very, very important. Part 2 is probably the most homework in terms of applicant workload. That's the description of the rehabilitation. So that involves a narrative of your scope of work, writing out exactly what you can do to the property. And it doesn't require, but it often entails the submission of construction documents, building plans, so on and so forth. Particularly on larger projects, it's really quite necessary in order for us and our counterparts in the National Park Service to be able to understand what we're proposing, review your proposal against the Secretary of Interior standards. Part 3 is typically the most fun part of the process, where all the hard work is done, and you take your beautiful after photographs and submit those, so that we can verify that you built what you said you were going to build in part 2, and we often enjoy getting those photographs because we can go back and look at the part one photographs and see the dramatic transformation that the rehabilitation has had. So, a couple important contacts for you during this process. There, the restoration specialists like me, if you're in my particular jurisdiction, or like Jennifer or Reed or any of the others, there's 6 of us across the state. We is sort of your first point of contact in terms of figuring out if the building's eligible, taking sort of a early look at your conceptual plans and giving you an idea of how they, where you might run into problems with standards and how can that be ameliorated early in the process. That's a great conversation to have early if possible. Although sometimes we do encounter projects that are mid-construction when the applicant figures out about the credits. It's not unheard of. Another important person for you to know is Tim Simmons, who coordinates the income-producing credit across the state. So his job is really to take the 6 of us and the different languages we speak and our different interpretations of the standards. And Tim sort of makes that uniform so that everyone across the state is receiving essentially the same type of service. Tim has also been coordinating this project since 1990, and so he has sort of a 6th sense on how the National Park Service in Washington will review projects. Very valuable and good person to work with in our office. Just to tie, just a couple slides about the standards. There are 10 of them, coincidentally, and so I like to jokingly refer to them as the 10 commandments for historic preservation. And although Jennifer goes into great detail in her presentation about the standards, I do like to give folks sort of the Cliff Notes version of what they dictate, so that you have a rough idea of what they are. I always include a picture of Hippocrates, the early Greek physician, because you might be familiar with the Hippocratic Oath in medicine. Do no harm. First, do no harm. That applies here to the standards as well. First, do no harm with your project to the building. That is, don't take a sandblaster to 18th century brick. That's a great example. I'm sure Jennifer has more that she brings up in her talk. Other important concepts in the standards: know the resource, understand its history and therefore its significance, so that you can identify and protect the architectural elements of the building that communicate that history. It's really important. Know a little bit about what the building was and how it was used. That's going to inform your thinking about how you might change it as part of the rehabilitation. Always sort of work backwards with an old building, not against it. So don't try to impose a non-compatible new use onto an old building. Look at what the building is inherently based on its form and its components and how it's built, and try to think of a new use that will jive well with that. Again, rehabilitation, however, is not the same as reconstruction or restoration. So accommodating change is part of the process, and that's allowed for to an extent in the standards. Finally, I like to talk about modesty and reversibility when we're working on old buildings. We are all stewards of historic buildings. There are people before us, and hopefully there will be people behind us who also own these buildings and also take care of them and use them, put them to use. And so think about that next person when you're planning a project. If you're going to do something dramatic, like perhaps an addition, think about how that addition could be reversible in the future if someone wanted to maybe take that off and still have at the core a historic property that they can put something to use. So those are 2 important concepts too. This is the fun part of the talk where I go through some great case studies from across the state. And we see tax credit projects in a lot of different sectors, and so on the largest scale we see industrial buildings in use. I mentioned Winston-Salem and its tobacco heritage earlier in the talk. Although Forsyth County is out of my service territory, I'm familiar with the long line of great large-scale projects in downtown Winston that put a lot of the old RJR infrastructure to new use. And so here we see Building 91 with its wonderful prismatic glass facades. Really great tax credit project in 2016. I believe that's now a biomedical research facility. And then one of my personal favorites from my service district, Randolph County, Ashboro, the Ashboro Hosiery Mills, which were converted, like many textile mills, to residential use in 2013. We see a lot of tax credit projects in the hospitality sector, hotels, restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. On the top is the mid-century Jack Tar Motor Lodge in Durham, which has been turned into a boutique hotel called Unscripted. It's very popular, really interesting building. And on the bottom, we see a sweet little store building from Asheville, the old Baird store, which was converted to restaurant use in 2015. I've actually never been. I've been by it, haven't eaten there. I'd love to go there someday. And then we see a variety of small little interesting projects, like let's see on the top, we have the Nash Street Candy Store in Southport, Brunswick County in 2013, transformation. And then a tiny little Armanda Johnson house in Edenton, I believe that's a rental property that we've done in 2017. And then sort of your more common, I want to say run-of-the-mill, but that doesn't do this building credit for the interesting little detailing. The Brothers Building in Elizabeth City, 2-story downtown commercial building done in 2018, and you'll notice that that building had a non-historic storefront that the applicant took out and put in a more traditional storefront, more appropriate for the building's vintage. So it was a great project in Elizabeth City. We're going to transition now to the state-only non-income producing tract, also known as the homeowner credit in our own little office vernacular. So this applies to owner-occupied residents that are certified historic. Remember, that means individually listed on the register or contributing within a district. These structures do not generate income. They're non-depreciable. So that means that they are owner-occupied primary residences, freestanding houses, condos, and they are subject to the 15% baseline state income tax credit with a minimum spending amount of $10,000 and a maximum of $150,000. So you can do a home restoration where a budget exceeds $150K, but the credit maxes out at that amount. And so if you think of 15% of $150,000, you arrive at $22,500. It's the maximum credit possible under this particular program. There is no federal equivalent. It's a state-only tax credit. I believe North Carolina is one of 34 states with a residential program of this sort. Or some states don't even have tax credits. So anyway, similar rules apply in the non-income tract as the income-producing tract in terms of QREs and the certification process. So again, we're looking at hard and soft costs, but those that pertain to the existing historic structure. So that excludes addition, costs pertaining to building of additions, site work, personal property, et cetera, et cetera. I mentioned the minimum spending amount, $10,000, also a 24-month construction window here. That doesn't mean you have to finish within 24 months. It does mean, however, that when you're going to calculate your costs that you're hoping to claim against the credit, you need to isolate a consecutive 24-month period within the longer construction timeline. So generally speaking, if someone does a 3-year rehab on a house or a commercial building, they will be strategic and select the 24-month period where the majority of the costs are incurred. Again, the certification process is the same insofar that we use the Secretary of the Interior standards to review a project. However, because this is a state-only tract, we keep the review in our office. It does not go to the Park Service in Washington. It's a state-only review. Again, another little hypothetical scenario here. This is a house in Myers Park National Register District in Charlotte. So let's imagine you did a $200,000 rehabilitation on this wonderful Italian house. Recall that the credit caps caps off at 150K, so you would in this situation be maxing out the credit at $22,500. And obviously, you would be meeting that minimum spending amount of $15,000. The application process is a little bit simpler for this credit than for the income producing credit. It's just a two-part process, parts A and B. Part A is a description of your rehabilitation in narrative form. Applicants will also include drawings if their projects are more complicated. We encourage that. Sometimes we require that based on the scope. Also, as part of the Part A, you submit those before photographs showing what the house looked like before you started working. Part B then is the fun part where you're done with all the stress, and Part A of construction, you submit a gleaming set of after photographs so we can marvel and drool over. Just kidding. We just like to see that A, you said you were going to build in Part A, and B, that those changes meet the standards. The contact here, aside from your restoration specialist assigned to your county, is a fellow named David Christianberry, who's been coordinating this program. Like Tim coordinates the income producing side, David has been around, I believe, since 1998, so he's got a lot of experience with working with homeowners around the state. There are a few limitations that you want to take note of with this program. Taxpayers are limited to one project for any 5-year period. This occasionally will come up. People participate and they have a good experience. Maybe 4 years later they find that they want to replace their roof. You did a project just 4 years prior, you need to wait 1 more year. That has actually, even in my 3 years thus far with the SHPO, that very situation has come up. So one project per any 5-year period. The credits can be transferred with the sale of a home, provided the sale occurs before the rehab is complete, which doesn't really happen all that often. Please remember that the IRS and or the North Carolina Department of Revenue administer the tax and finance side of these programs. And so you want to consult with these folks and or your own professional tax advisor for help in determining implications on your own tax situation. If you have old building questions or architectural questions, we are your people. Again, we're not experts in tax law. So a couple examples around the state of this particular non-income program at work. We find that the program is really effective for rural properties that are either in rural districts or individually listed in 2 great examples from Bloomington, North Carolina. Some wonderful old mill houses and a rural Johnson County farmhouse that had a dramatic transformation, as you can see from those photos. I like to give a little bit of tax credit trivia when I talk about programs so people can sort of understand the impact of these incentives. So in 1998, North Carolina devised its own state income tax credit that would augment that federal credit on the commercial side. And that was also the first year the residential credit came into existence. Following that move by the state, the activity in these programs increased dramatically. So you can see from 1976 to 97, there were 670 commercial projects in the state. And 1976 was the first year that the federal credit really came into effect. 670 projects. During the period from 98 to 2016, when the state had its own augmenting credit, that number ballooned up to almost 3,000 projects. So you can see the real impact of that North Carolina credit. North Carolina is we were number 4 in the nation, the number of completed certified rehab projects from 03 to 12. I think at the current moment we're right around number 6. And so we see a lot of activity in this, and we're proud of that. When I think about, and this project happened before my time on this, I started in 2017, but going through all the befores and after, this particular one from Redmond, the White Brothers Furniture Company, is to me maybe one of the most dramatic transformations, and so I like to show this this photo just in, I get a lot of oohs and ahs from this when I'm able to present it
That's awesome.
from audiences. That's the end of this presentation. I could have gone in a little bit more detail on certain things. And of course, there's the standards to consider too. I encourage you to look at Jennifer's presentation, as that's really the companion to this talk. But this gives you sort of a crash course in the basics. You see there my contact information. Please get in touch with me if you have any questions. If I'm not your restoration specialist in your particular county, you can also still reach out to me. I'd be glad to connect you either to Tim or to the restoration specialist in your territory. But again, I appreciate your attention. I see I clocked in a little bit over 30 minutes. I apologize for that, but hope this has been useful to you, and I would love to hear from you soon on a future project.
Very informative.
Okay.
If I was unmuted,
That's true about the 5-year rule. We finished our big historic in 2020, did the tax credits, and then we're just finishing up our second little mill house, but we knew we couldn't do the tax credits because 1 per 5 years, so. But
Well, I hope everybody learned a little bit from each of those, and we'll continue to do those every once in a while. Just there's more current workshops and seminars. Bree does a good job emailing those to you as well. So there's actually in-person ones now that are pretty close by, and the city will pay for the training as well. So take advantage of all of that.
What do you need from us for the?
Just a quick email, and I can send you the link with 3 titles, and if you want to just put down a couple of statements on each one, just email it back to us, and then we can send it on to Christy.
I already emailed mine to you.
Can you send that link out or
Yes,
to everybody
Yep.
so we can?
not a problem.
All right. Our next item of business is other business. How about minor COAs?
I don't think there was anything included. So you'll have a series of them. I just went through a whole slew. So you'll have a bunch of minor COAs in the next packet.
Is there anything else to say about CLG trainings?
Just what we've said.
Meeting location?
Yeah, so just briefly, mainly put on by other commissions, we are proposing and requesting the room location change from here, just right upstairs to the city council chambers. I believe that's where it used to meet. The other commissions, like I said, our Planning and Zoning Board of Adjustment, they've had issues where this room has just become too small, and having the audience essentially where you guys are sitting and then barely being a little bit further has just caused random issues that have come up. And I discussed it with the city clerk, and she said that there was no reason why we couldn't move upstairs. So again, it would still obviously be here, just moving it upstairs. You will need to just quickly, for procedure, do a vote. That way there's public knowledge of that there was this decision made, and I can help. I have like a motion written that I can just tell you. But if you guys had any questions, but it's just a vote to amend the meeting schedule, adopting a new space. We can take you guys after the meeting up there just so you can see the space. It's just, you would just come in, everything's already set up. You would just come in, sit down, and we would carry on the meetings like normal. It'd be a little bit different because we wouldn't be all down here. You would be on it's a little bit elevated, and then everybody else is down, but it's not a huge change, and we just really have to have a vote on it just so that for the public perception, if anyone reviews the minutes or asks why it's been changed, we have it on record that you guys voted and we're all in agreement. So I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Any questions or discussion?
What's old is new again.
Yeah.
So we need a motion. You said you had
Yeah.
one.
So the motion would be to make a motion to amend the meeting schedule to adopt moving the Historic Preservation Commission to City Council chambers.
So
Is there a second?
Second.
We'll do a roll call.
I can, Chair Pennington,
Yes.
um, Vice Chair Peeler,
Approve.
Member Benson,
Approved.
Member Mikings, has left the building. Member Weiss, Dice,
approved.
Member Ness,
Yes.
and Member Williams.
Approve.
So, this will all be posted on the website. It'll be updated in our letters, so whenever we have a major COA item, it'll be updated in there. We'll make sure it's in bold letters, that way people know, but it'll also be the thing of, they'll see us upstairs versus down here. And we'll also post it on the door as we have meetings. So that'll kind of be, the notification, and I'll make sure to include it in y'all's next email, that just a reminder we have moved, but it's literally directly above us, so I don't think we'll have any issues on that.
Great. The Minutry Pine Awards, is that how we say it?
Yes, so this, just giving you a heads up that in the next coming months, we will have the Minutry Pine Awards, and that coincides typically with Historic Preservation Month. So usually the Historic Preservation Commission will nominate at least one or two properties. Sometimes it's been all residential, sometimes it's been a combination of residential and commercial. So if you have any properties that you know of that you would like to nominate or start thinking about that process, now's a good time to start that.
And when do you need those nominations in by?
I would say be prepared at the next meeting. And if you have any before then, you can just email Bree or I. Because typically we like to have at least, 2 or 3 suggestions. And then the HBC will vote on them. There'll actually be a presentation with City Council and a proclamation of Historic Preservation Month. And those who have been nominated and awarded, that you will get a placard to mount on your home. So it's a really nice recognition.
Christina's often a good source. She's often in the know about.
I'm emailing right now too. And
Okay, that's great. Yeah.
I have several. I thought it was for tonight, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
And then just quickly, Bree can update you all on where we are with the Historic Preservation Seminar.
Yeah, so we have made a lot of change, or not a lot of changes, but we've gotten a lot of things solidified, I guess, with the seminars. So they're going to be called the Continuing Our Legacy Historic Preservation Seminars. It's going to be hosted at Burlington Beer Works. We went and toured the meeting space last week. We're really excited about it. They have pretty much everything we need. All the food and everything is going to be from there as well. They do in-house, and so we're working with them to have lunch will be provided. We'll have snacks when people get there. So just quickly going through the highlights or the schedule. People will arrive between 9 and 9:30 just to give people not super early. We didn't want to do it super early on a Saturday. And they'll just check in, kind of hang out for a little bit. And then we have our first speaker is going to be Donovan. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce his last name, but with Place Economics. He's spoken at a lot of different historic events, including the historic conference last year. So we're really excited for him to come in, and then we'll be going over underserved communities with James Shields, like we mentioned earlier, and he'll be doing it. Then we'll have lunch, and then Tracy is going to give a presentation about Burlington Beer Works and kind of do like a before and after of the building when they got it, and then what it's become now, and kind of just a little bit of the ins and outs of that. She has a presentation she says she's done before. People will have opportunity to ask her questions. And then we'll do a historic preservation panel. So we're going to try to get people from all the different, like Preservation NC, the State Historic Office, and there's a few others that I think we're kind of toying around. And so we'll have some, depending on the people we'll have there, we'll kind of have some pre-written questions just so that they can be thinking about their answers. And then if anyone who is there has any questions, we'll have time for that as well, and we'll just kind of bounce that off. We have it scheduled for about an hour, and then like another hour of just wrap up. If anyone's hanging out talking, we have the space until about 4 o'clock, until right after. We have created an Eventbrite to sign up, and so there's a QR code. There's also, it didn't post, but there's going to be a link down at the bottom that people can just easily click on. We're going to be sending out postcards as well to the historic district. I've got those working. We're waiting on a mailing list. And then we're going to do a press release. We're going to try to get it on Nextdoor. And I've also emailed our public information office and asked them any other ways that we can push it out. We'll also be emailing BTRC, Preservation NC, and everyone too, just sending them an email just to let them know that it's happening. We do have right now 75 spots. That is what we can go higher if we need to, but I think we're trying to keep it at 75 just to have it be a little bit smaller and have the opportunity for people to sit at a table and be able to discuss it as the speaker is going on. And I believe that is really all. So just make sure that if you guys are wanting to attend, that you guys sign up. I posted the event on Eventbrite today, and we already have 5 signups, and I haven't done any pushing. So that's just Eventbrite sending out to people who have signed up for events similarly, which is really good that we already have 5, because I haven't. This is the first time I'm telling you guys. We haven't emailed it out. So if you guys are wanting to attend, go ahead and register. And we do have like a survey at the end of it when you're registering that, like if you have any dietary needs, to just let us know. That way we can accommodate those, or if you have questions for the speakers who are going to be there, you can submit those ahead of time as well. And I think that's it.
Nice job. Good job. Beautiful.
So thanks, Bree, for your work on this very, very much. It looks great. Can we issue personal invitations to the city council?
Yes.
Yeah. We'll just have to, depending on how many, we'll probably have it publicized as a meeting, a public meeting, so that there's no quorum or anything issues, but.
Right, yeah. Put them in the room.
Do people need to stay for it's what, 7 hours or something? Do people need to, if they sign up, do they need to stay for the full?
No, it's a free event, so no one has to pay for it because of the grant. So if they want to come and only attend for Donovan's presentation, they are more than welcome to come and go as they please. If they would, ideally they would stay for the whole thing, but you know, it just is on what people can do. That's kind of why we did it 9 to 4. That way it wasn't completely all day, but it was also still a good majority of the day, because these will also count towards the CLG credits. So anyone who comes and attends at least, you know, one of the speaking sessions, they will receive a credit for that. And so, and if they come only for underserved communities and have lunch and then leave, that's also okay. So it's not a huge deal.
The deadline to register is May 1st.
Yes.
So that we can have enough time to ensure there's going to be enough food and everything else. There won't be any issue with it, but that gives us time to prepare.
Gives us a head count, gives us time to order anything we need to. So, but Burlington Beer Works has been great with working with us. We're really excited. The space is up there is gorgeous, and we'll have access to the rooftop as well. So if anybody wants to walk up there and just kind of look around, we'll be able to.
There.
Yeah, you can. When you eat lunch, you can take it up there. You can sit in the room. It's kind of up to you. And so that's exciting to have access to that area, because they really only rent it out for stuff like this. So
Help us spread the word. So let us know if you need some extra postcards. We'll have extra handy as well.
And then I can also email you the flyer. Y'all can post it anywhere that you know that there is posting. Like I know the Blend has a bulletin board on the side downtown, so I plan to take it up there sometime this week and post that there. Feel free to email it to anyone, send it to anyone. And like I said, we will be doing postcards, so those will be coming out hopefully this week whenever I get an updated mailing list of just all the correct people.
So do the postcards only go to historic houses?
We are, that's who we're
Registered
sending it
historic
out.
district.
Yeah, in the historic districts and landmark
Yeah.
properties, yeah.
I was just curious because it's, you know, one of the things is about underserved communities. I'm wondering if we could target
Yeah.
some of the postcards or announcements towards underserved neighborhoods,
Yeah,
you know,
And
to
that's
get
why I-
them interested.
yeah, I'm gonna work with, John Vernon about doing like the next door app for all these communities.
Yeah,
As well to kind of try to push it, and so if there's any other things that we could do that you guys know, or any public places that we could post about, or anyone we could email, like we'll probably email, I forget who it was we mentioned earlier, but like we'll be sending out to anyone that we can to kind of get that push
maybe we
out
should
there.
send it to some of the predominantly black churches.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well.
Cool. I did forget to ask one question about the Minnetree Pine thing. Did the renovations of the place you nominate have to be in the past year?
No,
It could just be any place, even if it was renovated 10 years ago.
I have a question about it too. Was the May Hosiery Loft, did they ever receive the award? I don't believe they did. but-
I was wondering if Burlington Beer Works ever got it.
I feel like we can look at the list to see,
And I know
Usually-
Tracy also renovated for Tanner's, didn't
Mhm.
didn't
Yes.
renovate for Tanner?
yeah. I know that one of the other properties that she was involved with, received an award. Or maybe she was Casey Lewis property, I don't know, maybe she wasn't involved with that, I'm not entirely sure, but there's been properties in the downtown that have received the awards.
There's also that D&J cocktail bar,
Mhm.
that main building.
Yeah.
I don't think they did the renovation.
They didn't.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we could award it to whoever did. I don't know who owns that building. I think they lease it, you're right. It's probably
Feel
the
free to
landlord.
send us some
Yeah,
recommendations and we can look into it further.
yeah, sounds good.
All right.
I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.